1. So I worked at a local supermarket. It's a fairly large franchise on the east coast of America. The store in question is named Weis. It's sort of the higher-end Walmart on the east coast. I absolutely hated that job. The people were great, but they gave me absolutely awful hours and the customers were ridiculous. But that's a story for another time. Anyway, I, and my manager, who I actually consider a friend, were working the 5 p.m. to midnight shift, as I normally do. The store closes at 11, but we stay to clean up and lock everything. Anyway, I showed up at 5 with my manager Logan. We usually show up at the same time and get a soda before our shift, and talk about what games we're hyped for. The store was completely dead. There were maybe 3 cars in the parking lot, not counting employees, so we took our time. After we got inside, the current manager on duty asked Logan to talk privately. So he went with her, and I replaced the current cashier. At this time, we only had 1 cashier on duty. Anyway, a few minutes pass, and I haven't seen a single customer to this point, which isn't strange. Then Logan comes back, and the previous manager clocks out. Afterwards, Logan comes over to tell me about the guy. Apparently, he showed up around noon, and spent the better part of 5 hours wandering the aisles and scaring customers. When the previous manager called the store manager Derek about it, he told her to leave him be unless he started acting strangely. We go on talking for a few seconds when a guy enters my aisle. He was probably in his mid to late 30s, balding, and was really short and heavy set. He also smelled abysmal. I assumed he was checking out, so I greeted him, but he just walked right past me and towards Logan, where he got in his face. Not aggressively, but as if to casually talk. But he was literally centimeters from his face and says, "Hey, my name is Michael. I'm no thief." Then he gave him a pen. Logan must have been taken aback, because he is usually great with customers, but he was speechless. I asked him if he needed help finding anything, and he said, "No, I'm okay," and walked off. Needless to say, that was the guy we were warned about. At the time, we found it amusing, and it was our topic of discussion for that night. A few more hours pass, all the while customers are asking about the guy, and he's still walking around. One old woman in particular was telling Logan how she actually felt afraid of him, so he called Derek again to tell him about the guy for a second time. I guess he told Logan to tell the guy to leave or we'd be forced to call the police. Easier said than done. Thinking back, Derek should have done more than push the guy onto us, a 20-year-old cashier and a 22-year-old floor manager. Anyway, he called the guy to the front desk over the loudspeaker. I was on aisle 1, so I am right next to the desk. The guy must have known we were going to kick him out, because he went into hiding. Our logic at the time was, as long as he's not disturbing customers, then we'll deal with it later. Obviously, we shouldn't have, but put yourself in our shoes. We're the only 2 workers, there's only maybe 5 customers in the store, and one of them is batshit insane. You'd avoid a confrontation as well. Another hour or so passes. It's just now past 9:30 and the store is completely dead. We called it the Ghost Town shift, because we'd be lucky to see 5 more customers until closing. Around this time, Logan and I usually just talk until closing, which we still did, but this time we were debating whether or not we needed to call the police. We knew that we should, but we hadn't even bothered to look for the guy. So we called his name over the loudspeaker again, this time telling him we were about to call the police. As expected, that got his attention. Other employees had told me later that he had been hiding in the storage area behind the grocery section. The only way to get back there was through the doors, but they're locked at this time, so he forced himself through the shelves in the dairy section in the back of the store, nearly breaking an entire shelf. When he got to the front desk, he explained to Logan that he's from Indiana and was instructed by God to drive east. So he did. And when he ran out of gas, he walked until he found the first store. Unfortunately, that was our store. After some discussion, we convinced him to let us call the police to help him out. The police arrived, and we closed the store early. It turns out he had been released from his psychiatric ward to be in the care of his father. They gave the okay, but then he stole his father's car and just started driving, like God commanded him to. I'm not sure what happened next, but I've been told that his father had to drive down to pick him up, where he is now under his father's care. Additionally, it turns out the guy took a nice steamy shit in the storage area as well, which some poor worker needed to clean up. There were multiple other crazy things that happened at that store. I only worked there for 4 months, but I've gotten some crazy stories from that job. This is just one of the few. 2. This is an encounter from about 10 years ago. It took place in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin airport. I was 19, recently independent, discovering my identity. In doing so, I had found and developed a relationship on MySpace with a girl from North Carolina. I was infatuated. We talked online, video chatted, texted, and called each other constantly for 6 months, until we finally figured out how to meet in person. She came to visit. It was perfection. I was obsessed, and that was that. We're still together to this day. Then it came time for her to fly back to North Carolina. Here is where things start to go wrong. She had a flight to catch, and I was dragging my feet, trying to absorb every last moment and commit it to memory, as I didn't know how long it would be until I got to see her again. We boarded a city bus, bags in tow, and headed to the airport. The bus trip took longer than we had anticipated, and when we reached the airport it was 5 minutes until boarding. We ran to luggage check-in, only to be told she had missed her flight. My lollygagging had made her miss her flight. Shit. A small part of me was secretly happy, but I had no idea what to do. I didn't have a car or any money to get her another flight. However, the woman at the luggage counter found her another seat on a later flight. 8 hours later, again I had no car. I was planning on riding the bus back home. We really couldn't leave the airport easily, so we looked for a spot to post up for a few hours. No problem, she had her laptop and some blankets and pillows meant for use in flight. We could hang out for a little while longer. I was actually looking forward to the additional time together. So we set off in search of somewhere to sit down and stretch out for a few hours. Meanwhile, I called my roommate at the time and asked if she could come down and bring some food, and my wallet I had left at home. We combed the airport and found an empty family room, complete with chairs, love seat, and plenty of wall outlets. Even better, it had a door. There was also a large bathroom, but the door was closed. The airport was pretty desolate, and there was no one waiting to use the room, so we sat our stuff down, plugged in our computers, got out some pillows, and snuggled down to watch a movie while we waited. My roommate showed up, and we directed her to the room over the phone. She brought snacks and drinks, and decided to wait with us and give me a ride home after. Cool. Only like 6 more hours to go. The 3 of us sat in the secluded room watching movies, my roommate mostly on the phone with her girlfriend. Eventually, sometime during our second movie, we were startled by the sound of the door opening. Only it wasn't the door we came through, which had been closed this entire time. It was the bathroom door. A man walked through the door and sat down across from us. He had been in that bathroom the entire time we were in there. None of us had bothered to check the bathroom. The light was on, but there hadn't been any sound coming from it. The man sitting across from us was average height, a bit overweight, dark hair, olive skin. His hair was wet, and he was holding a towel, running it over his head and scrubbing his hair, the way you do when you've just finished a shower. He didn't have on any shoes, he was barefoot. He had no luggage with him. He was wearing khaki cargo shorts, a white undershirt, and an unbuttoned Hawaiian print shirt over the top. At this point, he was sitting across from us, sitting casually, as if he hadn't been in the bathroom for more than 2 hours, silently. Eventually, he broke the tension in the room by asking us where we were flying to. We answered as casually as possible, without giving away any information about ourselves. We asked him where he was going, and he said, "Oh, wherever the wind takes me." Okay, we were vague, but now it's just straight up avoidance. I tried asking where he was from next. Oh, nowhere. I have no home country. Wait, what? I was confused. I tried to ask him where he had come from. Was he local to this city? No, I am from nowhere. I just go wherever. Okay, so now I am thinking maybe he is homeless and was just using the bathroom to clean up. No big deal. He will wander off eventually, right? My roommate got up to find better cell reception and walked out the door we came in through, intentionally leaving it wide open. I could see a few people walking around now, and I immediately felt better. The door is open, he can walk out whenever, we can walk out whenever. People can see us. Everything is all right. My roommate wanders back in and sits down, and we hunker down for another movie. By now the man is dozing off in the armchair he sat in, and we did our best to ignore him, making sure the door was left open and people could see us. Sometime during the millionth movie we were watching, we made a crucial mistake. We got bored and sleepy. We dozed off. Stupid. Incredibly stupid. But it's one of those things you don't realize you've done until you're waking up. What we woke up to is forever ingrained in my memory. Hard banging on the door, the shouting of police officers. Something about opening the door and walking out with hands up. My eyes dart to the door. Why can't they open the door? There isn't a lock. I see it. At the bottom, maybe 3 or 4 industrial box cutters shoved underneath, wedged in to keep the door from opening. My mind is reeling. What the fuck is going on? He locked himself in here with us? How could I have fallen asleep? How could we all have fallen asleep? The man starts talking. Okay, no problem. I will open the door. Hang on just a minute. He walks over to the door and pulls the box cutters from under the door, sliding their blades back into their hulls, and places them in the pocket of his cargo shorts. He opens the door and the police immediately handcuff him, and escort him away. All the while he is explaining that he just wanted privacy, and didn't mean any harm. Sure, dude. You needed box cutters shoved under the door for privacy, while you're in a secluded room with 3 19-year-old girls. Right. The police asked us if we were okay, and explained that they had been looking for him. Apparently he had a habit of coming to that airport and hiding out, harassing people, and being a general nuisance. We assured the police that we were okay, unharmed, just rattled by the whole situation. In the end, we never did find out where he was from, or where he was going. So, man from nowhere? Let's not meet again. 3. First off, this is the only creepy and scary-ish thing that has ever happened to me in my life, which is probably why it stands out so much in my memory. In hindsight, the location and general isolation probably made it seem much scarier than it was. But at the time, it felt like I'd stumbled into the opening scenes of a full-on horror film. Anyway, here's the story. So in 2010, I was fresh out of college and had moved back to my parents' house for the free rent and food while I looked online for my first real job. Now, my parents are super chill and gave me my own space in the house. But being a 22-year-old single guy and living at a house in the sticks is certainly not ideal, especially since 2 of their 3 cats were the spawns of Satan and would literally attack you just for trying to pet them. Anyway, so summer turned to winter, and I still hadn't found anything solid. But by then I desperately needed to get out of my parents' house, so I took a part-time gig, doing some light bookkeeping for a small business owner guy that my dad knew. I didn't really want to do it since it didn't pay much, was short-term, and wasn't even a real office setup. But since my parents lived in the middle of nowhere, Midwest, think acres and acres of farms, I knew I had limited local opportunities to make some cash. And this guy was going to pay me under the table as well. About that same time, a friend of mine in the city said that if I just paid him $200 a month and helped clean up, he'd basically let me crash in his living room until I got a real job and my own place. That was all I needed to hear. I took the job. So my dad's friend's family had a construction-type business. They helped out with building stuff a little, but it was ultimately more focused on renting out a few bobcats and large augers they owned. Also other various drills, and then odds and ends like generators and other low-level construction or farming equipment that someone in that area couldn't afford to purchase, but needed from time to time. This was a small mom-and-pop type thing, where everyone knew everyone, and the office only opened on days when someone was coming by. And was just generally a mutually beneficial situation for the business owners and the locals. Since I had majored in a business-adjacent area, and my dad recommended me, they trusted me to go in there for about 15 to 20 hours a week, and check and file the rental forms, make sure nobody missed a payment date, if there was a payment plan in place, answer an email or two, talking discussion prices and availability, etc. The old building where I worked was about, I think, 90 years old and at the top of this little hill, and the downstairs used to be an old country bar until the 1970s, when this family bought it cheap, cleared out the bar, and fenced in the property to use its parking lot area to store all their rental equipment and gear. I could generally come and go as I pleased, work any hours I wanted to, as long as the work got done, so if things were slow and there weren't any rentals for a couple days, I'd usually go in after 7 and stay until around midnight or 1, since I knew I'd be alone and could listen to music loud and take my time and all that. The office where I worked was on the second floor of the building above the old bar, and looked out onto the long driveway. From my seat I could easily see out the window, and once or twice saw a family of deer or a raccoon scamper by, and I always glanced out when I saw movement, since it was very noticeable. One night during winter it had snowed a few inches, and my dad told me to stay in because the roads were bad. But I had an old SUV and, more than that, just really wanted to get out of the house. So I went into work at about 8 p.m. and was going to stay until just after 1. I always left the gate open at the bottom of the hill, since, believe me when I say that nobody ever showed up at night, since we were literally in the middle of nowhere. I think the nearest occupied house was about 2 miles down the road, and to even turn onto our short road you had to be coming to our specific building, and probably know it was there beforehand. It was a locals-only type thing, and very small, since the family had inherited a lot of money, we're pretty sure, and kinda did this rental thing on the side. Basically, someone would never just get lost and end up at our building. So I'm jamming away to some Fallout Boy. Everyone makes mistakes when they're young. And having some coffee, and kept glancing at the snow outside here and there, since our one orangish streetlight reflected onto the ground at the gate, and was causing the light to shine off the snow in a really cool, dare I say pretty, way. At one point around midnight, I went downstairs to the big bathroom to do my bathroom business, and then came back upstairs and got settled back into my work. I probably did about 5 minutes of work when I glanced outside and saw a huge imprint of something in the fresh snow just below the light. It seemed like it must have been a huge dog or substantial animal that had just rolled around on the ground there on its back or something. Since I didn't notice it just 15 minutes before, it had to have happened while I was in the bathroom, or maybe while my back was turned, since I would have seen that type of movement for sure. I shook it off and assumed a dog or even a farm animal, this was common, was that type of area, had gotten loose. And maybe was attracted to the light or something, who knows. At around 2 in the morning I was leaving, and as always got out of my car to lock the gate up. And to be honest, I had pretty much forgotten about the imprint in the snow. But when I looked down I was shocked to see that it wasn't just some disturbed snow, but it was undeniably the imprint of a snow angel. If you don't know what a snow angel is, it's when kids lie on their backs in the snow and push their arms and legs back and forth. So when they get up it looks like the outline of an angel. I used to do this when I was a kid, so I 100% knew for sure that's what this was. And it was deliberately made underneath the light post, but it wasn't from a kid. It was from a very large person, or to say the very least, a normal-sized adult wearing tons of layers of big winter clothing. Now, I definitely would have seen or heard if someone drove up to our building, even if I was in the bathroom, so I knew someone had to have walked deep into the freezing cold and snow for a few miles, stopped in front of our building, and then do a snow angel in the small amount of time I wasn't in front of my desk window. I glanced around for tracks in the snow and saw that there was one set that led to the nearby woods to the right of the building. So it was clear the person didn't use the road, but instead came from the opposite side, which made me instantly uneasy, since that side was just woods for miles and miles. I was definitely a little freaked out now, once I realized that someone had just been this close to me, secretly in the middle of the woods. And I looked around, but didn't see anything amiss at all, and now just wanted to get the fuck out of there. When I got back in my car and drove a few feet, I realized my boss would be here in like 4 hours, and might see the snow angel and assume I did it, since he probably thought I kept the gate locked when I was there. It wouldn't have been that big of a deal at all, but I was young and felt like I might be made fun of by him, if nothing else. So I opened the gate back up real quick, ran over, and kicked the snow around so it hid the angel, locked it up again, and went back to my car. Also, I should note that this is what really happened at the moment, but I almost lied here and said something else since it seems fake, since I assumed the average person wouldn't get back out of their SUV and not just flee in their car because they'd be embarrassed about a snow angel. But at that time I was insecure and cared a lot about what others thought, so unfortunately, this is what I did. Also, I wasn't exactly fully terrified at this point, even though it was certainly unsettling. I just thought it was really weird and could have been an illegal hunter, even though hunting at night in the cold didn't make much sense. Either way, the imprint was made 2 hours earlier, and I assumed they were long gone. But that's when I heard it. When I was getting into my SUV, there was the loudest high-pitched laughing coming from the woods. It almost sounded like a fake laugh, like the witch in The Wizard of Oz or something. Like someone was doing it fake on purpose to show they weren't scared of me, or how I'd react at all once I knew they were there laughing at me on our property. It was close enough that I knew they could probably see me, and I couldn't see them at all since other than the streetlight, I was under no illumination. Now, I grew up in that area, and I know what coyotes and foxes sound like at night, with their high-pitched screeches during mating season, so I can't completely logistically rule that out. But to me, it honestly felt like it was an adult man trying to emulate a woman laughing. Like someone was deliberately trying to make a fake scary shriek laugh in order to scare someone. Well, it fucking worked. I immediately filled with adrenaline, got in my car and drove the hell away from there as fast as I could without sliding off the road. Back at home, I was up all night trying to figure it out and told my parents the story when they woke up. After talking it out, we all decided it was one of two things. It was either my brain somehow convinced itself that the snow formation was angel-shaped, when it was really just caused by some animal, and then the snow tracks and laughing was just a coyote or red fox. Or what I truly believe, which is that some local was out walking around for some reason, and decided to mess with me. I don't have any close friends left in that area that would do this, and if they did, would certainly have brought it up to make fun of me for speeding away in terror. I found out later that the nearest house was a super old couple, so I highly doubt that it was one of them, which means that whomever it was went out into the woods in the night, in the freezing cold, just to mess with a stranger. I don't have any mental issues or a family history of them. Didn't do drugs. I drank socially at that time, but certainly didn't that night. I also don't believe in the paranormal, so I never once gave that a thought. In my heart, I know someone was out there. I worked there another 6 weeks or so and never had a single issue, though I knew where my boss kept his gun, and I always made sure it was there when I started my shift. And I certainly always locked the gate from then on. Thinking about this experience that night, the part that freaked me out the most was that he had to have waited for me to leave for about 2 hours just to do that laugh. For some random dude, this is probably a story he tells from his point of view to make all his friends giggle hysterically. But for me, that dude, the one I call Angel in the Snow guy, the one with the laugh I'll never forget, let's not meet. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 271. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, I'm happy to say that the snow over here is clearing up. The roads are clear, the pavements are semi-clear, getting there, but at least you can walk about and delivery trucks are getting to shops and things, which is good. I have seen some people online rather annoyingly say, "Ha! You call that snow? We get worse where I come from." And good for you, mate, but you probably live in a country where you have an infrastructure built in to deal with that kind of weather because you get it all the time. We don't get that kind of weather all the time, so our infrastructure is different to handle different kinds of weather. So when you're in a country like this, it doesn't get that kind of weather frequently and you suddenly have to deal with it. Things tend to get quite disrupted. But seems to be over for now and we're getting back there. Probably should buy a proper snow shovel, I think, though. I usually just grab my trusty old garden shovel and get the snow, but I should get a snow shovel because it's wider. Yeah, okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.